All right, folks, if you can hear me, this is the week 3 uh, collaborate session. So let me go ahead and bring the slides up for this. All right, so we're up to week 3 now. So here's how we're going to work today. We're going to go through the slides for this week briefly. We'll have a Q&A session, and then we will go over the current discussion board topics. For anyone who may not have done the discussion boards yet. Okay, so just as a heads up, I like to do that every 3 weeks on these sessions, just so that everybody can be caught up with these as we go along. All right, so let's talk about structuring an argument. All right, so starting off with how to structure an argument. Most effective arguments have a structure that meets the needs of the rhetorical situation. That would be purpose, audience, genre, and form. Okay, you have to make sure that you are covered in all 4 areas of the rhetorical situation, so that you are writing to the right audience, you're saying what the audience needs to hear, and you are presenting your argument in the best way possible. Now, writers generally adopt a format that presents the arguments clearly and persuasively to the audience based on some basic factors. Okay, 3 factors you have to look for here. One of them is audience expectations. So what type of persuasive method will be the most effective based on how the audience thinks? Okay, so know your audience well. What are they expecting from you? What do they think about the topic? What are they expecting? How can you defy their expectations? All right, then you go to conventions governing argument in the rhetorical situation. It's to ensure that you are using the generally accepted format and organization for your situation. So if there's a certain format you have to use, like if you are submitting on a form or something like that, make sure that you are adhering to the format that they give you. Okay? And the third thing to consider here is the purpose of the argument. Why are you arguing this? What is the point of it? What is the point that you're trying to make and get to by arguing this point? So looking at the structure for a classical argument, it has a 6-part structure that you typically see used. Starting with an introduction, okay, where you're going to present the main argument in context. So present what you are going to be arguing and in what context this argument exists, okay? That also includes the background information. Present a narrative of events or statement of facts to show the reason for the argument. So give us the series of events that's leading up to the issue that you're arguing and why you're arguing it. You have the proposition, which is the statement of the writer's argument or position and a summary of the key points. Okay, so what is your argument? What is the point you're going to make? And what are the points that you're going to use in order to prove that argument? What are you going to do to make sure that people understand this is the argument that you want to make and it's the right argument to make? Then we get to the proof, which is your reasons and evidence. What kind of logical reasoning do you have behind wanting to do this, wanting to argue this way? What kind of facts back you up? You have the refutation, which is an acknowledgement of the opposing viewpoint along with the rebuttal of their points or acceptance of shared facts. Okay, so you're going to try to counter the opposing viewpoint, try to show how their logic is flawed, how they're wrong, and acknowledge whatever facts that they're using and try to use them to your advantage. And then the conclusion, summary of the main points of the argument with a final appeal to the audience. This is the parting shot, what you want to try to get across to your audience before you end the argument. Right. So starting with the introduction. Your argument should have a strong introduction to grab the reader's attention. Especially important if your argument is being written for an opposing argument, for an opposing audience, okay? If you're trying to convince a hostile audience that you're on the right side of things, you're going to have to be very strong in your introduction. You need to have something that's going to convince them that you're worth listening to even, okay, before you even get into the argument. So find an angle for the hook that will make the reader continue to read and hold their attention. Okay. Some of the examples that I give you here are anecdotes, short little stories about people who are affected by the argument. Okay. Interesting related facts about the argument. What kind of stuff can you tell them that maybe they didn't know about the subject of the argument that might influence them to change their viewpoint on it? Some basic storytelling. Okay. Give us a hypothetical situation. What might about somebody who might be affected by this argument. Ask a question. This is a good one because what this actually forces the reader to do is participate as opposed to just observe as you're reading your argument. And then challenge the reader's assumptions. The introduction is your first chance to force the reader to think about your argument from your perspective. Okay, this is important. This is a lot of things with argument all comes down to the perspective of which side is doing the arguing. Okay, so your introduction is your first chance to demonstrate to your audience, hey, this is the viewpoint I have. This is where I'm coming from. Let me try to demonstrate for you why this is right. Okay. Let's get to the background. Okay. This brings your audience up to speed in regards to your argument's background. What kind of origins does your topic have? This is typically presented as a narrative of the issue and the events surrounding the argument. So really good idea here when you're exploring the story is to explore both sides of the argument and the facts and events that are agreed to by both sides. What are both sides willing to acknowledge? What are both sides willing to concede? Okay. Look at what both sides of the arguments have to say. And explain why the issue is so important to those who argue on both sides. Why is it so important that they get their point across and they get the argument going their way? Okay? So give as much detail as possible within the constraints of the argument. Okay? So basically look at how much detail you can give on that background in the context of the argument you're trying to make. What's going to help illustrate your argument, what's not going to help, what's going to be extraneous. All right, next comes the proposition and the proof. So this is the point when you present your core argument and your justification for it, okay? So proposition is the argument itself. It's presenting your entire side of the argument. What are you trying to prove here? What is the argument that you're making? What side of this dispute are you on? So give your reasons for supporting the argument. Make a compelling argument by presenting reasons that stem logically from your experience and belief system, okay? Again, this is important. If you do not believe in your argument, then it's going to come across as being kind of hollow. All right, so make sure you are presenting good reasons that are logical, that you personally would believe that you feel, okay? And give evidence which prove your reasons to be correct. Now, the difference between reasons and evidence. Reasons are why you think it's right. Evidence is why the facts say it's right, okay? Evidence is made up of irrefutable facts which both sides can agree to their factual nature, okay? These are facts that have been independently verified. It's things that you are beyond reproach, okay? Evidence should always support your reasons. As you go along with your research, if you locate evidence which either is irrelevant or unsupportive of your argument, just set it aside, okay? Don't focus too much on it. You might find a use for it later, but I would recommend just set it aside just temporarily until you know whether you can use it or not, okay? Next part of this is refutation, okay? Now, one thing that's important with argument is that you must give time to the opposition, okay? So just remember that any fair argument is going to acknowledge the opposition if only for the purpose of refuting it, okay? You need to be aware of what they're arguing, why they're arguing it, and how they're arguing it. Above all else, no one should ever argue with blinders on. You do not want to make yourself consciously unaware of what the opposition has to say about the topic, because then you're going to be completely unprepared when they rebut you and their rebuttal is stronger than your main argument. Okay? So, How do we refute the argument? Well, start off by briefly presenting the opposition argument and reasoning for their argument. Why do they feel that this is the right path, of action? Why do they feel the way they do about the argument? Why have they taken that side? Okay. Present the opposition argument and their reasoning. Okay. The next thing here is going to be evidence, because what you're actually looking for is evidence that's going to prove them wrong. Okay. However, what you must acknowledge is evidence which supports the opposition as fact. Okay. If it can be confirmed as fact. Okay. If they're presenting facts that back up their side and they can be independently confirmed, then you have to acknowledge, okay, you have some factual data on your side. Maybe there's something else in your logic that's flawed about the situation that's making you feel this way when you really shouldn't be. Okay? One thing to remember, though, alternative facts do not exist. Fact is fact, and an opponent who is just gleefully willing to disregard reality is not worth arguing. Okay? So, do not fall into the trap of somebody giving you a bunch of fabricated facts, and trying to pass them off as their evidence, and you let it go unchallenged. No, you challenge that stuff, okay? Now, what you do here is refute the argument with your own evidence. Sometimes the evidence you set aside because it does not entirely support your side can be helpful in this case. Okay, that's why I said set it aside, because you might have to come back to it later. If it wasn't strong enough to go in your main argument, it might be strong enough to refute the opposition. Okay. Now, again, occasionally you have a refutation that can use the opposing reasons or evidence to support the main argument. Okay, and we had that example here, the argument about glove and boots, opinion on whether Johnny Depp should retire or not. Okay. I will say I've had a number of responses to this that were kind of interesting. For the most part, I will say the current leader in terms of who won seems to be the side that says Johnny Depp should not retire. Okay, let's see. I'm just going to take a look real quick at what we have written on that. Okay, so I have one vote for no retirement. 2 votes for no retire. See, 3 for no retire. 4 for no retire. 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, right now it's unanimous. Actually, nobody wants him to retire yet. Okay, so as you saw with that video, yeah, they use the exact same reasonings. They also use the exact same evidence, but they presented it in 2 different ways. And we're trying to refute each other. Now, obviously, the side that said Johnny Depp should retire did not do as good a job as the side that said Johnny Depp should not retire. Okay? So keep this in mind when you're thinking about refuting an opposing argument. Okay? See if there's any way that you can use their evidence or their reasoning to back up your argument as opposed to theirs. Okay? Then we get to the conclusion. Okay? Your conclusion is the last chance you have to make a lasting impression on your audience. Now, your conclusion should leave an impact and make your audience think. Okay? That's the big thing here. You're trying to leave a parting shot with your audience, make them remember your argument, make them think about your argument, and make them consider in their minds whether your argument might have some merit to it. Okay? To offer your answer to any previously asked questions and reiterate those questions to the audience. Okay? So if you started off your introduction, if you at some point in your introduction ask the audience a question, give your own answer. Okay? And try to remind your audience, hey, I asked you about this at the beginning. Do you have an answer yet? After I've talked about you? Well, here, let me tell you what my answer is. Okay? A big thing about the conclusion is it should summarize the argument. Just give a brief overview of what you presented in your argument, just as a brief reminder for the reader before they go away. You can also present a call to action to urge the audience to act. Okay? this is a strong way of concluding an essay is if it's something where urgent action is needed, maybe you are going to be the catalyst for that. Maybe this essay is going to, them reading this essay is going to be the catalyst for your audience taking action, taking a stand, deciding that they need to change things. Okay? So if you call them to do that, if you challenge them to do that, that's actually a really strong way of concluding an argument essay. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is that all appeals apply when you get to the conclusion. Okay? The ethos appeal applies. You establish your credibility and have your argument to show that you know what you're talking about. Okay? So all through this, you basically talked about your argument, the evidence you have, the reason behind it. You also have to talk about why you feel you're qualified to talk about this subject. Okay? What perspective do you have that makes you uniquely qualified for this? You have pathos. Make the audience feel the way you do to make your audience argument more impactful. Okay? Make them feel. Not to the point where you're replacing any logical content with pulling on heartstrings, but make them feel something about your argument. Make them feel what you feel about the topic. Okay? And then finally, logos. Give another logical interpretation of the issue and your argument. Okay? Appeal to that higher brain. Okay? That higher way of thinking. Make them think this is the smart thing to do. Okay? Make your argument seem like the more logical one and the more intelligent one. Okay? All right, so that does it for these slides. And what we'll go ahead and do is have you guys do we'll take some questions here. Anybody has a question, go ahead, raise your hand. I'll recognize you. You can go ahead and say your question. All right, we have a question about the essay. In 1301, we had a guide to help us write our essay out. Do we do the same, or do we do everything on our own? Mostly, I like you guys to do things on your own here. Okay. I've tried to do as much as I can to give you the guidelines you need in the lectures, in the slides. You have the chapter as well that can act as a guideline for you. Okay. I've just given you this week. I've given you the structure I want you to use. Okay. So. So just try to keep up with the stuff that we're doing in the lectures, and you should be okay. All right, so I have a question about how I feel about the GME situation. This is the GameStop short squeeze. I will say I try to keep my own opinions out of the discussion topics, but I have to say this one caught my eye because it was kind of amusing. Uh, I don't really have a lot that I do as far as investments go. I have some minor investing I do in mutual funds, so it doesn't really affect me too much. But I will say that it has been fun to watch. Just everything just absolutely unwind, and all these hedge funds managers just going absolutely ballistic because of what's been going on. And it's also interesting to see how much of this is starting to turn into a when we do it, it's okay, but when you do it, we don't like it, so we're going to complain about it situation. And it's like, well, what do you think you guys been doing this whole time? Okay, it kind of makes me feel like I'm back in the 1980s again. So, uh, so yeah, it's an interesting and messed up situation. And we'll go over for those who might not know what's going on. So I talk about it's actually one of the discussion topics we're going to talk about it. Okay. Okay. As GME is still shorted about 200% as of today. We are still holding the line. Okay. All right. Well, hang in there. I bet you if it doesn't make you rich, it'll at least bring some change to the system that's way overdue. All right, so if anyone else has any other questions here, got a minute here, and then we'll start going over some discussion questions. All right, folks. So we're going to go ahead and since we're at week 3, I like to do this every 3 weeks. We'll go over the most recent 3 discussion board topics. Okay, just this is in the interest of anyone who hasn't posted to them yet. Although I will say 71 people posted the first one, so most likely everybody here has done their bit for this, but I'll just go over it anyway just in case. Okay, so I'm going to just read over the 3 topics that I've posted for weeks 1 through 3. If you find any nuance that you think you need to add to your response, or if you have not responded yet, uh, then this will give you a chance to do that. Just as a reminder here, these discussion boards lock on the last day of class, which I believe is May 7th. So when you guys are locked out of these, that means you're not going to be able to post anymore. So make sure you have all of your stuff done before you get to the last day of class. All right. So this is the week 1 discussion topic. It was titled "The Ethics of Accelerating Scientific Discovery." Okay. So here's the discussion topic. Truly, we are living in historic times of historic turmoil. Between the social unrest, political unrest, and pandemic, 2020 was chaotic for just about everyone alive. Hope arose at the end of the year, however, going into 2021, as the first vaccines for combating COVID-19, the pandemic that has swept across the globe and caused massive change to everyone's lives in just 9 short months, began receiving emergency approval for widespread usage. Here in the United States, there are currently 2 vaccines approved for use. One developed by a joint effort by pharmaceutical company Pfizer and German biomed firm BioNTech, and another by American pharmaceutical company Moderna, with a third, co-developed by AstraZeneca and Oxford University, is due to be brought up for approval in April. Meanwhile, other vaccines are receiving approval on different schedules worldwide, from multiple companies simultaneously working toward an end to this global contagion. The speed at which these vaccines have been developed and tested, however, might cause some concern, especially when compared to historical vaccine rollouts. For instance, it took nearly a decade of development and testing for the polio vaccine to receive approval for use, with great success in eliminating the disease for most of the developed world. The same with other commonplace vaccines, which are now standard, including most recent until 2020, the HPV vaccine. Some fear that shortcuts might be to the public's detriment, especially in that both the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna vaccines skip the second of what's normally a 3-phase testing schema for vaccines, moving to human trials quickly in order to get the shots out fast. This may have reached its extreme in India, where emergency approval was granted to a shot by Bharat Biotech, only to have Bharat admit that the first doses administered after approval would constitute the vaccine's phase 3 human trials. For your discussion this week, argue the benefits and drawbacks of these speedy vaccine development cycles and approvals. Do you have confidence in the vaccines being made? Do the accelerating timelines offer enough of a chance to prove the effectiveness of the vaccines, or should more study be done? As more vaccines are in the development pipeline, for instance, Johnson & Johnson is preparing their FDA approval presentation on their single-dose vaccine. How should these companies proceed in terms of their timeline and practices for development of this specific vaccine? All right. Now, I do provide you with 6 news sources to support this discussion topic. So the 6 I give you here, one is from Financial Times, COVID vaccine tracker, the shots available and the doses administered. So that's basically just a tracker page to show who's getting what vaccines. They have the New York Times. Mexico approved the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine for emergency use. Okay. Third one's from Reuters. China gives its first COVID-19 vaccine approval to Sinopharm, which is a native Chinese company. Fourth one from WCCO, which is a either a TV or radio station in Wisconsin. After trials at Alina, Johnson & Johnson's one-dose COVID vaccine awaits FDA approval. Then we have the New York Times. India approves Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine and one other. Okay. And then finally, this Science. Scientists criticize rushed approval of Indian COVID-19 vaccine without efficacy data. That gets into the Bharat Biotech. Okay. All right. So that's the first topic, and like I said, a lot of you have already responded to this one. So maybe you don't have to worry about it. One other thing I do want to make sure, and I did make sure I put this in the second topic, when you reply to these discussion topics, I do not want you creating your own thread. Just post it as reply to the main thread. All right, so the second one, second topic from week 2, video games too political. Okay, so here is the topic. Video games in the past have been the target of scrutiny from society because of their content, usually in context with how the content could corrupt young players in terms of violence and misogyny. This backlash has given birth to a subgenre of gaming where developers produce simulators of ordinary activities, some of which go viral because of their absurdity. Goat Simulator, anyone? Recently, though, developer SCS Software ran afoul of critics because a game in this style was accused of being too political. The game in question, American Truck Simulator and its European counterpart, Euro Truck Simulator 2, ran an online event in its multiplayer servers called Hauling Hope, in which players were encouraged to simulate hauling loads of COVID-19 vaccines to vaccination facilities. Participants who completed the challenge, 7 undamaged runs within the event time period, would receive a special achievement in the game as well as cosmetic prizes for their in-game rigs. The event was similar to an event run last year by the company, #TruckItHome, which was a charity drive in addition to a game event. The Hauling Hope event did not include the charity element. However, SCS Software was not prepared for the backlash that the event would create with vocal anti-vaxxers who claimed the game was too political and was trying to inject politics into a video game where politics don't belong. SCS issued a clarification in order to placate the audience, trying to explain that they were not taking a side in the vaccine debate, and that they were only trying to show solidarity with real-life truckers. The company's initial announcement of the event also wound up having its language altered in order to de-emphasize the role of the vaccine in the event, even though the whole point of the event was hauling vaccines. The posture wound up drawing criticism from all sides, especially from video gamers who have noted that politics have played a role in a lot of video games in the past, such as Metal Gear Solid, and that politics can occasionally be impossible to remove from a game's story. For your discussion this week, talk about the situation with SCS Software and the Hauling Hope event. How do you feel about SCS's attempts to keep both sides happy in this situation? Should the event have taken place at all, or is there an alternative event you would have recommended SCS to pursue in the game? Thinking about video games you have played in the past, how has politics played a role in any of them? What games that seem apolitical on the surface have surprised you with political content when played? Okay. We have 5 sources on this. 2 of them are from SCS Software themselves. One is a description of Euro Truck Simulator 2, and the other one is the blog post where they announced the Hauling Hope event. Third one's an article from PC Gamer. Euro Truck Simulator 2's tribute to vaccine truckers leads to anti-vax confusion. Studio apologizes. The fourth source is a YouTube video from a channel run by a fellow named Jim Sterling. They had a section on their regular show, the Jimquisition, about this situation with SCS. It's actually how I heard about it initially. Okay, and they talk about how politics have really been a part of games, no matter what people who complain when they don't match their politics say. Okay, and they bring up the topic of Metal Gear Solid, which leads into the next source, which is the description of Metal Gear Solid from the Metal Gear Wiki, so that you can see what kind of political content that they're talking about. All right, so like I said, a lot of people have responded to this. Many of you are taking the side of SCS. Okay. Are basically saying that people who are reacting to this are overreacting, or SCS tried to do the right thing, things like that. Okay, so I'm cool with that. Let's see the next topic. All right, here's the week 3 topic, the most recent one: GameStop and short squeeze chaos. Okay, and here's your topic: proving that this year is possibly equally as chaotic as 2020. Last week, the action moved to the financial realm as video game retailer GameStop launched into the news thanks to Reddit hedge funds, an investment strategy that has been long in existence but not well understood. Small-time or retail investors on a Reddit forum called R Wall Street Bets took note of several hedge funds short-selling shares of GameStop. As a brief explanation, short selling involves borrowing shares from investors, selling them at value, then waiting for them to depreciate before buying them back to return to their original investors, thus making a profit on the difference. When Wall Street Bets noticed a lot of short selling activity on GameStop, they started investing heavily in the company using common retail stock trading apps like Robinhood, thus causing the value of the stock to start increasing at a near astronomical level, a tactic called a short squeeze. Shares that initially cost less than $10 prior to the short squeeze quickly rose up to around $400, creating some instant millionaires out of the Wall Street Bets investors. This caused chaos in the investment world, particularly among professionals in the financial industry. Hedge funds started losing millions of dollars as investors began demanding their stocks back, and the short sellers had to buy it back at the inflated prices. Anger arose from Robinhood users and other retail stock trading app users as the app set stocks to sell only, not allowing further purchases on GameStop and other short squeeze targets named by Wall Street Bets. Some of the companies included Nokia and Bed Bath & Beyond. Public disclosures later revealed that at least Robinhood's parent company was one of the hedge funds that was hemorrhaging money because of the GameStop activity, leading to a class action lawsuit on behalf of the investors. General public opinion started criticizing the hypocrisy of the industry, claiming that the financial professionals were willing to freely use strategies like short squeezes to make themselves money, but cry foul when ordinary retail investors do the same tricks. For your discussion this week, take a side in the situation either with Wall Street Bets or the hedge fund managers. How do you see the situation from your side? What kind of action should be taken either in the courts or in regulation to rectify the situation? Should short selling be regulated tighter, or is the system acceptable as it is? In your opinion, how within their rights were the Wall Street Bets retail investors to engage in this short squeeze? Okay. We have, again, 5 articles acting as references for this discussion topic. First one is the Wall Street Journal. The GameStop short squeeze shows an ugly side of the investing world. Then we have from Mint, a brief history of short squeezes before GameStop. Third one's from CNN Business, inside the Reddit army that's crushing Wall Street. Fourth one is from Ars Technica. No, Wall Street Bets isn't robbing Wall Street to help the little guy. And the fifth one is from TMZ. Robinhood sued. You screwed the little guys in bed with hedge funds. Okay. Primarily speaking, I've been keeping track of the responses on these. Thus far, just everyone who's responded to this topic thus far has been siding mostly with Wall Street Bets. Okay. In fact, I think just about everybody has sided with Wall Street Bets so far. Okay. All right. So that does it for the discussion thus far. Now, remember, you do have until the end of the semester to complete this discussion board. And you also want to make sure that you're completing the discussion board to the requirements that it needs. And that is, every response needs to be at least 3 paragraphs. Okay, because any posts that are shorter than 3 paragraphs, you're going to not you're not going to receive credit for that particular posting. Okay. And this also includes, I did see one person who posted their response. It was 4 sentences, and each one was its own paragraph. And that would work if they were long sentences, but they were very short sentences. Okay. That one's not going to get credit unless you can expand those paragraphs and make it at least 3 of them. Okay. So, so that does it for that. Okay, and we'll do another. Let's go 5 minutes worth of questions before we cut you guys loose here. So, anybody has any questions? Go ahead, raise your hand, or post them to the chat. One or the other, whatever you're more comfortable with. All right, folks. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys cut loose if there's no questions. Uh, next week, we're going to be doing some more involving uh, inductive and deductive reasoning. So next week is the first of the workshop sessions. It will run the full week. Your team will need to see your essays, and you will need to present them with feedback. Okay, so be sure you're ready for that. Keep working on the stuff on eCampus, and we'll have another sessions next week. I'll see you then. Thanks for coming, guys.